My class consciousness awakening was walking into Rogueport for the first time and realizing that Super Mario 64 gave us a very skewed view on the economics of the Mushroom Kingdom. No, it's not all racing penguins down slides and eating delicious cake. Sometimes it's gallows and grandmas being unable to replace their contact lenses after somebody steps on them. The Paper Mario series is a bit of a spiritual sequel to Super Mario RPG, and is a taste of the Mario property delving further into story, dialogue, and turn-based gaming that includes customizable ways of approaching combat. What these games had going for them is that they were downright hilarious. Rather, they were clever, throwing out zingers and interesting puzzles that use the unique nature of the Paper Mario universe as a means to solve them, cracking the mold of the basic dungeon boss tchotchke that'll save the day just enough to keep things somewhat fresh while following a path that we were used to as emerging gamers. To discuss one of my favorite things about the Thousand Year Door in particular, I'm honestly a sucker for unique level designs that almost hide the aforementioned mold entirely. For instance, the Glitz Pit arc, in which you fight varieties of enemies under special conditions and restrictions and upgrade your status as a fighter, becoming a sensation known as the Great Gonzalez. It's one of my favorite video game levels of all time, one of those that still follows a typical dungeon format but hides it well enough that feels new and unique, much like the Snow Temple in Twilight Princess, in which the dungeon is just a really big house that may have seen better days in some areas. That was my favorite example, but Twilight Town did some interesting stuff too, to the point where I looked like an absolute goose because once I had beaten the boss, I had set my controller down and just waited and waited and waited, and I was like, the game must have froze or something, I don't know what's going on. It was funny, fun, and the companions were amazingly designed and kept the game fresh, and who doesn't like playing as Peach and Bowser in the interim? I admit, I found Bowser's segments to either be hilarious or dull with very little in between, but Peach's were always a unique treat either via weird puzzles or fascinating dialogue with her computer fomance. Thousand Year Door very much built off of its predecessor, taking its best parts and making another story by improving everything learned from the previous game. It clearly had a lot of love built into it and the passion for the project shone through. And then, well, its sequel came out for the Wii. I remember those times when I was super tiny and I didn't have enough words to express the deep upset I felt when a game I wanted wasn't quite as expected. I am happy now for the opportunity to give those feelings a voice. It's time to talk about game consoles. The first Paper Mario was a game for the Nintendo 64. The Thousand Year Door was the game for the next system, the phenomenally popular Nintendo GameCube. Remember the next one, the Wii, y'all? Let's talk about it. The Wii came out in 2006 and rapidly became the most well-sold 7th generation console in the year after its release. Why? Was it just that amazing? Was it the GameCube, but infinitely better? Not really. See, the Wii not only had motion controls, its most marketed property, but also had a very simplistic controller with only two main buttons: online connectability to make buying games more accessible, and an absolute lack of third-party game support. Nothing new for Nintendo at the time, meaning no one starting a gaming career with the Wii ended up feeling out of the loop. All these made the Wii a relatively anti-gamer console, more so meant for getting atypical audiences into the Nintendo market. It expanded the Nintendo audience significantly, but changed things entirely for the console's longevity and popularity with developing gamers. Gamers like me stuck through it because I was small and I had no money, so the console in my parents' living room was the one I got to use, but it definitely felt off as I played games like Wii Physics demos, Wii's first body image issues, and Wii's physics demos but more. This spread to the games made for the Wii that were actually continuations of series Nintendo was already famous for. We got Twilight Princess, which you could just play on the GameCube. Skyward Sword, only playable with motion controls if you got the extension that gave you more motion control for your motion control stick, and even then was a massively hit or miss property. City Folk, which you could just as easily play on the DS if the City Plaza wasn't your jam and you were okay with things being a bit wilder and worldier, and several others that reviewed well but didn't seem to have much of a lasting impact, with the stark exception of Galaxy, which from what I hear is what kids call Pog as hell. By the nature of the Wii's controls, all of these games tended to be on the simpler end where button mapping was concerned, and everything needed to be enhanced with motion controls, which ranged from vaguely annoying to an absolute headache. So in short, Super Paper Mario, a Wii exclusive, was in fairly dangerous footing before the game even begun. Remember how I said a bit ago that the Thousand Year Door took everything good from its predecessor and built off of that? That's where Super Paper Mario begins to stumble. So the biggest issue with Super Paper Mario is that it's a major break from the RPG nature of the series thus far. The combat is now completely real-time, the leveling system has removed the element of player choice and customization, you now have a set path of game progression. It also takes the teeth out of companions who are now just piles of geometry with personalities, no longer to be used in combat the way they were before and mostly just puzzle assistants. Better than nothing, but certainly not an improvement. Now, considering the Paper Mario series' popularity stemmed from it being an RPG, removing the entire genre was a choice. A choice that could be called good by someone with no grasp on proper assignment of adjectives to games. But for a chunk of people that didn't mind the gameplay change, the writing still carried it, made it an enjoyable game in the Paper Mario series. It seems like the main split in Paper Mario opinions is when, game-wise, the series failed, Super Paper Mario or Sticker Star. Speaking of which... So, I'm sure some people enjoyed Sticker Star, and that's valid, but I'm ready to be a hater here, so proceed with caution. What the hell was this game? Once again, I ask you think back on everything successful about Thousand Year Door. Back to Sticker Star. Now, around this time in Paper Mario development, interviews indicate that the team had to ask permission or avoid making new characters in the Paper Mario universe, a move that I could only assume was made out of a sudden fear of the concept that any of the Paper Marios may ever be successful again.
Bloom, glorious bloom. It's so simple.
Step 1, we find the worst play ever written. Step 2, we hire the worst director in town.
This game took probably the most stressful thing games can provide to players, single-use items, and made the game's entire core conceit revolve around it. Want to fight with anything other than basic attacks? Use up a sticker. Of course, you don't get anything for winning, so it's more of a reverse grinding scenario where you spend resources the more enemies you get duped into fighting. And they took out companions entirely. And the plot. Why is it called a Paper Mario game? Because it has stickers? It was hard, seeing something unique and neat like Paper Mario and the Thousand Year Door fall so far, and it was my first experience being so let down by a series, so I think that's why it sticks out so much to me. I had long since written it off as a tragedy in game development. Origami King gave me some hope, and it's clear that the idea is still there, that the writers are obviously trying to do their best with their limitations. Notice how Bobby's nicknames are nicknames and not who the character introduces himself as? But it's far from the earlier lightning in a bottle the series had. Now that they're remaking the Thousand Year Door, I'm terrified of the thought that the devs might actually remember how beloved that game was, and may actually in some way begin integrating what made the game so amazing into the world again. Hope is a painful thing to have after all. We will see. What do you think? What was your favorite entry in the Paper Mario series, and why? And if you believe the series went downhill, why do you think that was? As always, please drop a like and subscribe if you enjoy what I'm doing here. It helps a lot with the motivation to make new videos. Have a lovely day all, and I will see you in the Glitz Pit.